everybody, it's Mark Crowley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning about shading a face that is being lit from two different sides. We're going to have some bright light coming from way over here on the left, and then maybe a softer light coming on the right. And what I'm going to do right now is begin to refine a little bit of the line work, talk about maybe what is going to be covered in this video and what isn't. Obviously you can see that I've already put the line work in place. I've got other videos that show you how to place lines like this and draw a face roughly in this same pose, and I will link to those videos in the description below. But really what I'm going to try to do is focus 100% on the shading and capturing that effect of light as it, as I said, strikes this face from two different sides. And of course that always creates a sort of a dramatic feeling when you see dual lighting like that. Often in movies, it seems to me, you'll see that kind of a lighting scheme. And of course you don't have to follow this video in such a way that you're trying to replicate this exact face. You could have a character of your own that you've always wanted to try shading with light coming from two different sides, let's say, and then you can just apply the lessons in this video to a character of your own creation. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of like coloring in the hair, let's say, maybe refining the details of the eyes, everything except for the shading. And then I'm going to come back and hopefully be able to do in real time an awful lot of the shading process. Well, I'm going to be refining this a lot more later on, but I think we got enough to get started in terms of adding shading. So, as I said, she's got this pretty intense, bright white light that's going to be hitting her from the side, coming over here on the left. And so what happens is that there is an area of shade that begins to form kind of 1/3 of the way across her face, because as I said, there is also kind of soft light that's coming over here. And so as I begin here at the top of the forehead, this area that's maybe just above the temples, I suppose, is the first place. And then right here at the edge is right where the two different sources of light are very nearly touching one another. And so you get this kind of diagonal area of shade. Now, a couple of things I probably should have said from the outset. One is that I'm working on this kind of tan, brownish shade of paper. That's going to allow me to pull out my beloved white gouache later on to add some of these lighting effects. But you don't need to work necessarily on tanned paper like this to sort of follow or learn things from this video. You could just add the shading onto white paper and get fairly similar effects, really. But notice also that I'm holding my pencil at a very, very low angle to the page. Normally when I'm trying to get details, it's going to be more like that, right? But I've brought it way down low to the page so as to expose as much of the lead as possible. And that allows me to do this kind of soft shading. My approach is to do sort of circular movements of the pencil lead, the idea really being to have it all blend together into a single tone in which you no longer see any lines at all, that it becomes entirely just gray shade. And for me, for whatever reason, the circular motions help me to achieve that. So you can see that it kind of snakes its way down this sort of area where the two different light sources, as I say, nearly touch each other, but not quite. And as we get down here, as I studied from photographs of people's faces that were lit in this way, I was sort of intrigued to notice how the jawline collects quite a lot of darkness right down here over to the side of the chin. And, you know, all of this will probably get intensified later on as I proceed. But, yeah, there's almost like a line of shadow that comes right across there. Now, the next area that we're going to move on to, although, you know, maybe should say that I was almost a little surprised at how much darkness collected right here on this side of the eye. And then also the eyelid itself gets caught in this light scheme with quite a lot of this area getting shaded in. We should probably do the ear, but I'll save that for last. Let's keep moving across the face here. I'm going to begin to shade this area of the nose, and it certainly is helpful to understand the structure of the nose and how it sort of protrudes from the face so that you can imagine where the shadows would collect. But really what happens if you've got this type of a light situation is you end up with a roughly diagonal shape that comes right here along the, what we would say is the left side of the nose, of course, would be her right side of the nose. But you can maybe see me getting more and more tentative here with my movements of the pencil so as to not go too far and get too dark. For me in general, I don't know about the rest of you, but for me in general, the nose is this very sort of tricky part of the human face in terms of not wanting to call too much attention to it. But you can see me beginning now, and I've moved almost unconsciously from that low position to changing my way of holding the pencil so as to get even more precise. And this is where I saw in photographs a lot of light collecting along this sort of nostril area. Not the nostril itself, but the sort of covering of the nostril. And just right here at the edge is where a lot of the shadow would sort of collect, where the sunlight just can't get in there. I always try to avoid making the nostrils too dark, too big. So I'm going to kind of glide past that. But this area here near the tear duct, again, studying photos, I was a little surprised to see how light would collect in there. Or not light, but shadow would collect in there, where the light cannot reach. And then maybe these two areas do sort of come close to touching one another, these two areas of shade. But yeah, in a way we're doing all the shadow stuff first, and at the end of the video, I'm going to be coming back in to actually apply light by way of the white gouache and possibly also a little white colored pencil. But let's get into drawing the lips here, and again, I think with some of the photos that I was studying, the light source over here might have been a touch on the low side. And that ended up causing a lot of the shadow of the lip to collect on the upper side of the lower lip, if that makes sense. And a little less here, like this area of the upper lip was getting more illuminated. And then this becomes tricky because depending on the shape of the person's upper lip, you might actually get a little touch of shade here along the upper edge. Again, if the light source over on this side is a little low. And that is getting us closer to finishing up the details of the face. Maybe I should get just a little bit of shading here of the upper lip, or the sort of flesh above the upper lip. But I never like to call too much attention to this area of the face when I'm drawing, sort of personal preference. To me, it looks a little more elegant when this area is not too sharply defined. So again, you're seeing me get fairly tentative as I apply shading in this area. But interesting to me that, again, like this area near the nostril, a lot of darkness collects here, but I'm not like seeing a lot of darkness following off on that side. It sort of comes to a complete stop there almost, with the light source over here illuminating this whole part of the cheek. Now, let's go ahead then and do the ear. And this is a somewhat unusual lighting situation in which the light is really catching this edge of her face. It's going to be very bold right there. But in terms of the ear, quite a lot of the ear is actually still going to be in shadow, and the light is just kind of going to be kind of hitting on the edges of some of the structural elements of the ear. But you see me darkening in this area of the sort of interior of the ear. This whole ridge structure here is all getting shaded, and even the ear itself, you know, the sort of ear lobe, there is a spot here where the, you know, the angles of the earlobe connecting to the jaw or the side of the face ends up creating quite a defined area of shade, where most of the earlobe is, you know, quite shaded in, but it just almost abruptly comes to a stop right here along the edge of the jaw. And maybe that's enough. There's, you know, a lot of this starts to get into structural stuff related to the ear. But I think that'll probably do it for now. What's really interesting down here with the jaw is, like I said, there's this area of darkness right along the jawline that I'm darkening in. But then, because of her hair maybe blocking out the sunlight that's coming from the left-hand side, this whole area ends up falling into shadow. And so you have to, you know, you switch from darkening in this area to suddenly darkening in the opposite area on the neck. And then right around here is where these two things sort of switch off, and a fair amount of shade in a fairly subtle way, a gradual way, begins to spill down across her neck. And this whole area, as I said, I think because the hair is kind of in the way, or you know, stopping the light from getting through, this whole side of her neck is going to end up getting shaded in. And I think what I'm probably going to do right now is to pull out my trusty black Prismacolor and darken up these lines in time-lapse. Tighten things up all the way around. I might be back in here with a little more subtle shading going across the forehead, let's say maybe a little bit here near the bridge of the nose. But the next thing you're going to see me doing a lot of is adding the white highlights from the two different sides of the face. So bear with me, I'm going to go ahead and in time-lapse darken all these lines in with this black colored pencil. Alright, so you can see after I got all the blacks in with the black colored pencil, I did go back in and start to sort of refine some of the shading here. That happens a lot, actually, I find, when you use, you know, you do a drawing all with pencil, and then if you do come in with a darker, like charcoal, or in my case, black colored pencil, it beefs up the contrast to the point where you have to kind of go back in with the pencil a second time and add a little more shading to get it all to sort of balance out. But now it is time for the fun part, in which I take my beloved white gouache and add some of these highlights. Now the light is, as I said, pretty intense over here on this left-hand side of the face, her right-hand side of the face. And so that's why I chose to do this with white gouache, because it is going to be very opaque and really cover up all of the sort of tan-colored paper underneath. I'm not going to be able to do all of this real time. I'm certainly going to be coming back in time-lapse to clean this stuff up a little bit. But at least I can show you the basic areas where intense light would hit. And basically it's this upper area of the cheek running down along the jaw. And, you know, I may try to blend to whatever degree I can, right, the paint so that it blends little by little and fades into the gray area. That, for sure, I'm going to do more of during time-lapse. But let's look at where some of the other little intense highlights are going to go. And one thing, when you use white gouache, if you do want to use this technique, make sure that you blend in a little bit of water to get it to the right consistency, because when it's in the tube it's super thick and hard to get onto the page. But here's where the light is going to hit especially if it's a little bit behind her, it's just going to catch certain parts of the ear rather than the entire ear. And you don't want to go too far with this. I think once you've got a few of these little bits, that's probably enough. Again, I'm probably going to clean this up a little bit later on. But this hairband that she's got, that would certainly get hit with the light. So I can go ahead and get that on there. And then, even like the whites of her eyes. Hang on, I've got to sort of mix up the paint a little bit more. We're going to get a big, bold dot here in each one of the eyes, really where that white light is coming from, and then the whites of her eyes probably also getting illuminated fairly brightly. But I may come back with, when I move to the other side of the face, it's mainly going to be white colored pencil. So you're going to have two different ways of adding white to this page. One over here on the left-hand side that is, as I said, a little more intense. And then a lot that's on the right-hand side is going to be a little more subtle. But I figure if she's got maybe a little bit of lip gloss, we might get some whites illuminating the cheeks, like so. And maybe before I go too much farther with that, it is time to switch to a white-colored pencil and show you how we can have this secondary light source coming in with white-colored pencil. And because it's not as opaque as the white gouache, you end up with a different quality of white because just a little bit of the page is shining through. And the reason I wanted to show this in this video is, a lot of times, like in a movie, when you have dual lighting, lighting coming from two different sides, it's not the exact same type of lighting. The light that's coming from one side is maybe a different color, let's say, than the light that's coming from the other side. And so that's why I thought, well, let's have half of it, this intense white gouache, the really bold white gouache, and on the other half we'll use the white colored pencil. And you can see that this is more, it builds up more gradually. It's not nearly as opaque, and it will help to convey this idea of two different light sources. And basically I'm showing you where the light would go on the, the right hand to us, the left hand to her, side of the face. And a lot of this has to do with your understanding of how light works, basically, which parts of the face would be illuminated. Now, I referred earlier to how I looked at photographs of faces that were lit from both sides. That certainly is, using reference like that is a great way of making sure that you're getting the physics of this right. But, in a lot of ways, if you're doing like fantasy illustration, and you're having a fantasy character lit from both sides, I don't know if you necessarily need to be using reference for all of that. You could sort of just apply these principles to that drawing of where the light is going to land. Even a little bit of light sneaks over here to the area of the tear duct, I found, in a lot of the photos that I studied. And that is probably going to bring us to the end, or very near to the end. So a lot of light is going to come down here on the neck, for sure. I'm going to take a little more time-lapse time to refine my shading, add more white gouache, clean things up a little bit, and then we will be back with a few final words. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed that. I think this might be the first video I've done in which I sort of contrasted the effects of white gouache and white colored pencil in terms of adding highlights. And let me know what you thought. If you enjoyed it, I can do more videos like this. But before we go, I always like to say thank you to anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like My Last Summer with Cass, my latest graphic novel, The Drawing Lesson, working on a sequel that's coming out this summer the comic book lesson, and of course mastering manga 1, 2, and 3. I am so grateful to those of you who support me by getting those books or by joining my Patreon. Got a link for that in the description. But it's high time I laid down this pencil. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.